Welcome back to Effing with the Ineffable with myself, Zoe, and
Smokey Pigleton,
aka Will. This is our second episode. We just recorded and released our first episode yesterday, but we had some very nice feedback, and we decided that while we're here, together in at my parents' house, I almost said where you live, we are going to make hay while the sun shines, right? And try to record as many episodes as we can while we're here. And we also today's topic was a requested topic from multiple people. We're going to be talking about the COVID-19 pandemic and the lockdown and all that stuff. But before we get into that, just a few notes. First of all, I wanted to say I felt like the video quality in our first episode wasn't the best. We tried pretty hard to get the sound to be okay, and I think it's all right. The video, I don't know. I'm not like thrilled with it, but we're just starting this off. We're trying our best.
Once we can buy a professional studio, it'll be a lot
much better. And
a lot more polished.
Yeah, pay an editor to do all this.
I'll look a lot more like Brad Pitt.
So I guess I hope that the message can come out despite the technological, gaps.
Limitations.
Yeah, exactly. But
we did touch on the COVID a little bit yesterday.
Yeah.
We talked about it.
We talked about a lot of stuff yesterday.
Yeah, we
and
did.
I definitely want to make an entire episode talking about the COVID vaccine. Talking about that from...
Because I was in favor of it, saying that it was a governmental success.
Well, and I want to talk about it from the governmental perspective and the Catholic perspective, because I don't know if you remember, a couple days ago, I was ranting to my father and my husband about the implications of the vaccination, and I promise we will have a whole episode about that, because I have a lot to say about it.
She does.
There's a million articles that have been coming out about it and all kinds of stuff, so we will talk about that. We're not going to talk about that today, so if that's what you came for, you'll have to wait until we release our next video.
Hold your horses.
Yes, but we will be talking about the lockdown and from a Catholic perspective and a libertarian perspective. The other thing I wanted to mention first was that if you want to stay in touch with us, you can follow us on social media. We have a Twitter, which is at effingwith on Twitter. We have an Instagram, which is at effingwiththeineffable on Instagram. And you can always email us at effingwiththeineffable@gmail.com. So, and of course, follow us on YouTube, and if you like our videos, subscribe so you can see more, and comment. We've already had several nice comments on our first video, and some stupid comments, but that's okay too.
Ooh.
One of my siblings was making some stupid comments, but that's okay.
Jealous.
We welcome them all. We welcome them all, the stupid and the nice. So
there are no such thing as stupid questions, but there are a lot of inquisitive idiots out there.
So, we wanted to say thank you we've had actually a surprising amount of nice reactions to our first episode.
I was surprised.
Yeah, I actually was too.
Yeah. I expected to get scourged at the
Well,
pillar.
Not only like scourged, but I also just thought, like, who would care about our take on things? Like, I'm not making this necessarily for people to watch. I'm making, like, if people watch this and gain things from it, then I feel like that's awesome. And if God can use us to, instruct
Mold
people,
minds and hearts.
yeah, like, then that's amazing. Because as a stay-at-home mom, and I'm sure as somebody who, works with a lot of people who don't necessarily want to be helped, and, if you're counseling people, he went from counseling people who were kind of there because they were mandated to be there to now counseling people who are there because they're mandated to be there in an entirely different way. I think that, we don't always have the opportunity to like to help people and to instruct people in a way that they're going to be receptive to. So if people are receptive to what we have to say, I think that's a huge blessing. And
yeah, okay, that's good.
yeah, okay, that's enough of
Move
that.
on. We appreciate you.
The only other
welcome.
The only other like
feel your pain.
The only other happenings that I wanted to mention, since we only recorded yesterday, is that today is the Feast of the Holy Family. So happy Feast of the Holy Family if you're watching this today. And although this probably won't get out until
everybody's
tomorrow.
Part of the family.
But yeah,
right?
and you know, I it's just a special feast thinking about how Jesus came. You know, we were talking a lot today about how Jesus came as a baby into a family. Like, he could have come in any form on earth. He could have come as a fully grown adult. He could have come as an animal. He could have come as
like a T-Rex.
Yeah, exactly.
And just kick butt.
And he chose to come as a baby into a family, and that's an amazing thing. So, love on your family today. And I have a friend who wrote a book about Catholic traditions, especially European Catholic traditions, and she said that the Feast of the Holy Family is often a day where couples will renew their marriage vows, and actually in Europe, I guess, a lot of priests will bless married couples on the Feast of the Holy Family. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that and say happy feast to you, and yeah, before we get into the...
Because otherwise, there's not... there's been a few married saints, quite a few, really. But there's not a lot of... other than the wedding feast at Cana and stuff like that, there's not always a lot of specific wedding, marriage-themed stuff. A lot of it is about God's relationship with us, not necessarily always about spousal relationships. Horizontal.
And the only way that we can, the only way that we can create the next generation of the church and of citizens of the United States making good libertarian children and making good Catholic children
is in the laboratory.
I guess that's one way, but you need
Is it?
you need a woman and a man, and you need obviously the best context for that is the family.
Should we explain how that works?
No.
Okay.
You can Google it if you need to. But yeah, so anyway, the families are important, and like I think families are actually a good...
The family is the basic unit of society. The stronger the family, the stronger the society, which is why a lot of the governmental pushes to minimize the importance of the family and to actually actively work against the family are really anti-Catholic and just not sustainable.
Not only
Without
that,
families, you don't have... I believe the children are the future.
Not only that, but I also think that they are, when you undermine the family, it takes a lot of work to raise children. And when you undermine the relationship of men or of any two people raising children, but, fundamentally of men and women who together create children, you create broken families where you have single motherhood and less common, but still out there is single fatherhood. And because that takes so many resources, that often creates dependency on the government, because to raise your children, you either need to have you have to have a lot of money and a lot of time.
You have to have a lot of support.
Yeah.
There's always the tension between the degree of stress that you have and responsibility and the degree of support that you have. So you either need social support or you need some kind of other support, which is, unfortunately, the government has stepped up and said, oh, we're the only ones who are going to be able to provide that social support. Who did it before the government did? Sometimes, unfortunately, no one, and that's why the government felt like it
Had to step in.
They could step in and do it. But for the most part, throughout the ages, it's been the church has been the extended family. When you don't have an extended family, the church is your extended family, and they step in and take care of you when you need something, and they take care of their own and they help their own. But now that the government has stepped in and done that, it's kind of taken away from neighborhoods. It's taken away from families. It's taken away from those traditional social structures that have provided the bolstering for the basic nuclear family, which, as I said, is the real unit of society. I mean, the individual is important, but the real unit of society is the family.
Let's focus on
Let's
the
move
topic
on
of
to
the
our
day,
main topic,
which is
suggested by a viewer.
Several viewers suggested this topic, which is COVID-19 and the lockdown, and kind of the Catholic perspective on this and the libertarian perspective on this. You know, it is hard to talk about this topic.
Because we're still soaking in it.
Well, that, and like I have a real, I think one of my fundamental flaws as a human is that I tend to let perfectionism stop me from doing things. If I feel like I can't do something really well, I don't want to do it at all. And I feel like when we're talking about something like COVID, it's such a huge topic that obviously we're going to get things,
we're just going to glimpse.
We're muddling our way through it, just like everybody else is muddling their way through it. And we're going to leave things out. We're going to say things wrong and whatever.
We're going to say stupid stuff that we're going to look back and say, why did I say that? Oh, especially years from now, we're going to look back and say, oh, man, were we naive?
Yeah.
We didn't realize this was the new frontier of a new world order that was starting to march on across the world.
We didn't realize it was the aliens all along. Let's talk about, first of all, the libertarian governmental citizenship perspective on this. My personal perspective is I have a lot of notes written down, but I think we need to keep in mind that this is a real problem for some people. We know people who have died from COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And we know people, your parents particularly, who are at great risk because of their age and their health conditions. We understand that this is a real thing, and for some people there are real health risks to this. I am fairly young. I don't have any pre-existing conditions, so I feel like my personal risk for COVID is extremely low. I'm not worried about getting COVID in terms of getting sick myself. I have young children. It seems that, once again, right now, we're still figuring out the science of all this. We're still right in the middle of it. But it seems that most of the time, young kids are completely fine, usually asymptomatic. Of course, there's exceptions.
You may have already had it and didn't even notice.
That's very possible.
I may have had it too. I don't know.
But I'm not good. I don't want to be reckless about it because there are people I care about who are older or have pre-existing conditions, and I don't
said yesterday I'm an old man.
I mean, you're not like target demographic of COVID, which I think is like 85 and up, but
I mean, every decade,
of course,
is puts you more at risk.
Yeah,
but I think it's really the people who are superannuated 80s plus who are really at a higher, quite a bit higher risk, and even those, I believe it's probably not more than 20%, is it? Or even that, if that,
of death rate, or
yeah, if they get it. I don't even know the stats.
We don't know the stats, and we're not really here to talk about like stats specifically, just because that, once again, that's changing all the time. But so we're acknowledging that this is a real problem, but I think it's important when we're talking about huge issues like this. as libertarians, you know, it's not just like the federal government is the be all end all. There's federal control, there's state control, there's local control. I personally believe,
and there's individual control.
of course, that's the most important. But I'm just talking about top-down governmental authority of telling us what we can do and what we can't do. I personally think that in terms of COVID, I wish that more control was in the hands of the local government to say, we're going to make choices for our constituency. Should we completely shut things down and lock people out of being able to do their jobs? Should we be like, you know, Sweden at the beginning, where they were kind of like, you know, if you're old or at risk, stay home. If you're not, continue on with your normal life. Because we don't want to sacrifice our entire economy to, you know, for the people who
shutting down the entire country when most of this was contained to New York. Really, it was almost all New York, at least initially. I guess there was some on the West Coast. Yeah, Seattle and stuff, there were early outbreaks. But shutting down the entire country because there was some contagious factors going on in those isolated areas, that was foolish.
Yeah.
I dread to think how much that cost the United States in terms of gross domestic product.
Yeah.
It had to be just trillions of dollars. Plus, then they threw trillions of dollars on top of that federally, which, I mean, why does everybody in the country need a check when some places haven't even been shut down?
Yeah.
And why is it a federal issue versus a state issue? If the states are issuing mandates that there's no commerce going on, then the state needs to take care of that.
Yeah.
The feds don't need to take care of that. That's another situation where the feds are glad to take over and assume the responsibility for it, because it's another way for them to accumulate more power. And the more power they have, the more power they get to continue to influence. And like I said yesterday, it's a snowball effect where the governments, and it's not just in America, obviously it's worldwide, and the tendency is always for power to seek more power.
That's just human nature.
As Bruce Springsteen said, all men want to be rich, rich men want to be kings, and the kings aren't satisfied till they own everything. They want all the power. They want to be able to do it. They want to be able to run the entire show, and do so absolutely.
Yeah.
And it always corrupts, because they always do it in a way that benefits them. You got to wonder why your state representatives and why your state senators and such haven't been pushing for more state control.
Yeah.
Why hasn't there been more pushback in saying, we're not shutting down our state? We've got, you know, for the longest time here in my neck of the woods locally, there was 0 cases in several counties. Why would a county be shut down that has had 0 cases?
Yeah. Well, and this was another. So I talked a lot to my husband about this today. My husband is in law school. He is, you know, he's constantly looking at these lawsuits that are coming out about COVID. He was talking about specifically, you know, North Dakota. Look at a state like North Dakota. The unemployment rate in North Dakota is extremely low. Most people in North Dakota are working jobs where they're outside fracking. And they're outside. They're not even near another human being within, you know, social distancing limits of another human being. Why should North Dakota?
How much of it gets transferred outdoors anyway?
I mean, this is another thing we don't know.
I think outdoor transmission is extremely rare.
And we don't. But I guess the point is, there's a state like North Dakota and there's a state like California where everybody's in very close contact to each other, or New York, which is an even better example. Everybody's in very close contact with each other. Should New York and North Dakota be under the exact same mandates? I think the answer is obviously no. And I think that the more local you get, the more that those governments know the situation that's going on with their people. They should be able to say, we think it is rational and justified to make a law that right now we're going to shut down this part of our country or our county, our district, or not. And they can make that decision. And it's just, anyway.
It's a matter of, there's in Catholic social principles, there's an important principle called subsidiarity, which is where the decisions are made at the point and by the people whom they most affect, which is always more local. It should always favor more local because the local people know what's going on more than the federal people. That's not how the federal people see it. They believe that they have arcane knowledge that makes them more capable of deciding how people should live than allowing us idiots to run our own lives. And that seems to be the basic principle a lot of times.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that libertarianism has been trying to press back against throughout the history of
all time
liberal thought.
Yeah. And I think the important thing once again is that it's not like the government, the federal government, the state government, the local governments have knowledge that the rest of us don't have access to. First of all, we are all figuring this out as we go. Like, all you need to do is look at the history of
the novel coronavirus. Yeah. It's brand new. Nobody knew exactly how this was going to work.
It's like they used to think that masks didn't work at all. Then they thought masks are great and we should all wear them. Now a lot of people think that masks don't do anything. And it's like, that's just one example of a million. But I guess the point is, the point I want to focus on is I think that the government is focusing very hard on this one issue, on COVID. And they feel like it's their duty to protect us from this one thing, coronavirus. When you focus solely on one thing and don't take larger issues into the picture, you're going to make mistakes and you're going to get myopic and you're going to leave out a lot of factors that need to be focused on. Like, if we just say, if everyone stays away from each other and we completely shut down the economy, we are going to save lives from coronavirus. That might be true.
Yeah.
But what gets ignored is people are losing their livelihoods because some people can't work from home. People are going to be increasingly isolated from other people. That leads to lessened mental health, increased suicide rates, increased drug overdoses. I don't want to go down this rabbit hole because I could talk about it a lot, but luckily my kids don't go to public school. But think about the kids who are in school who are for now an entire year trying to learn virtually. I mean, schools are doing different things all over the place, and we're trying to figure it out. But I don't think that this is a healthy environment for school children who are very low risk for this virus. I understand that there are adults. My husband.
Some children have died.
Of course.
And those were children who probably, for the most part, had some kind of underlying conditions that made them much more reactive to the virus than the run-of-the-mill kids. Is that a tragedy? Yeah. Every loss of life is a sad thing.
Yeah.
However, as Zoe was saying, you have to look at the net cost of all these things. There's a lot more factors than just in the media, damn them. really focused on, oh, any loss of life is completely unnecessary. That's not true. You always have balancing factors. Any loss of life is a shame, and that's certainly probably the predominating factor that we need to take a look at. But it's not the only factor,
Yeah.
because there is loss of life that comes from despair and suicide.
Mm-hmm.
There is loss of life that comes from not being able to get treated for other illnesses.
Mm-hmm.
People stayed away from hospitals
From doctors.
because they were concerned, or they were turned away because doctors' offices shut down.
Mm-hmm.
People have not been able to get treatment for substance abuse disorders.
I was
There's
gonna
been
say that
tons of relapses and overdoses since this started. Now, those numbers don't necessarily get mentioned in the analysis and in the whole calculus of what the damage has been from this, from COVID, and from the COVID response.
Yeah.
The COVID response is not purely without a cost.
Yeah.
There's a human cost to the COVID response, not just in terms of livelihood and in terms of people losing their jobs and losing their meaningful involvement with other people. There's actual deaths that have occurred that were related to this COVID shutdown.
And I mean, think about even the people in your prison who are a population. My dad's job is to give these people substance abuse counseling. These people are there because they obviously have a lot of issues. No one gets to prison without having a lot of problems. You don't just mistake your way into prison.
You usually get more than 3 strikes before you're called out.
So and these people are not getting the help they need right now because of COVID. And that, I'm not saying that we should necessarily just go in there and risk your health and your safety for
especially because it has been a vector of transmission. You know, that it's been a place where there's been a lot of transmission going on. So, obviously you have to guard against that.
But it's just one case in the sense that there's tons of people in the country not getting mental health help right now. Tons of people who are postpartum and probably going through postpartum depression and anxiety. And a lot of people, I just read an article a little while ago about people who were experiencing postpartum issues who were having Zoom calls with their doctors or telehealth visits with their doctors, and they're not getting the help that they need. And that's a scary thing, and that's not to be taken lightly. Those people, their health and their lives matter as much as the lives of the people who are getting COVID matter. So anyway, all that to say, my husband and I were talking a lot about, the view of constitutional law. In order for a law to be justified, it has to be rational from a constitutional perspective. And the question is, when does something become rational? If I'm a certain state and I decide, let's say I'm the state of Kentucky, and I decide that our number one goal in Kentucky, just not even thinking about the pandemic, but our number one goal in Kentucky is we're going to lower suicide rates by any means necessary. If we do that, there's going to be lots of things that get left behind, that don't get taken into account. And the cost of that makes it irrational to have that law.
And the solutions become subsequent problems. That's what we talked about yesterday.
Yes, exactly.
That, solutions that are short-sighted and only one factor is taken into consideration almost are always the wrong solutions.
Yeah. If something is a net negative overall, it's not justified, and so it's not a just law. Ultimately, what we want, all of this boils down to, the government doesn't have any more information than you do. What we need to do is inform people and let them make the best decision for themselves as possible. It's one thing for the local government to say, we think it best to stay home during this time, and we think it best to shut down your business for a time to slow the spread of the virus or whatever. But ultimately, it should be up to individuals to make those decisions for themselves, because individuals know best for themselves. They're going to know their own personal situation more than any government official who's representing you. That's my take.
And they're going to make decisions based on what's in their enlightened best interest. And if they've really been enlightened by the information that's available to everyone, then they're probably going to make decisions that are in their best interest. If they don't, then they've got some other kind of problems, and that's not really who we need to dumb everything down to. The government needs to trust its people to be making good decisions and giving us opportunities to do things. That's real freedom. When you have the freedom to do the things that you need to do to be the best that you can be. And the government has been great about providing a lot of things for people, almost too many things, to the point where they've taken away from individual responsibility by doing so.
So anyway, I think that the takeaway that I want to make from this, first of all, is that as far as the libertarian side of things, is extraordinary circumstances are the perfect excuse for government to come in and take extraordinary power. And we have to be really careful to not let them just take that power and never give it back up. Because when the government takes power, it is very, very unlikely that it will give that power back up voluntarily. Ever. Without the threat of violence. Without the threat of overthrow and revolution. Without armed
rebellion. Yeah, that's what happened in 1776.
And there's no better excuse right now as a country for the government to come in and take extraordinary power than we are all afraid because of COVID.
Right.
And I think that is something that we just need to be very cognizant of. Now, I think if you're okay with
the danger isn't always the crisis. The danger is the response to the crisis, where the government says, we're here to help.
Yeah.
When the government shows up and they say, we're here to help, hide.
Yeah. Grab your gun. Grab your guns.
Run and hide, because they're gonna want to run your show.
Yeah. I think if it's all right with you, let's talk. I don't want to go too long, but let's talk about the Catholic perspective on this issue.
Should we talk about that bishop first?
Yeah. So we got
Did you read that?
Yes, I did. Did you?
Yeah.
I got I even highlighted and made notes.
Nice.
We
She's organized.
Somewhat. So we got a submission from a viewer who I don't know if they want to be named, so I won't name them. But
right.
We got a submission from somebody who sent us an article about Cardinal Burke. Do you know who Cardinal Burke is? I don't really know who that is.
The name's familiar, but I didn't write his biography or anything.
So, Cardinal Burke, I guess, gave a homily about COVID and talking about how COVID is being used for the Great Reset to attack freedom and families.
Did you look up that Great Reset? What that means?
I don't, but I think in the article he's talking about basically.
Did you look it up? Yeah, he talks about it a little bit. The Great Reset is it's a Sustainable Development Initiative, SDI, which back in the day, that was the initials for the Star Wars from the 1980s, the Strategic Defense Initiative. But now it's the Sustainable Development Initiative. It's the World Economic Fund, which is, I don't know, some kind of dark deep state or New World Order kind of program where all these different governments are getting together and they're talking about this Great Reset, that this whole COVID situation has brought about a recognition that there are aspects of the economy that aren't working for certain people. And so there's going to be this Great Reset, which basically seems to be in a lot of ways, more centralized power for governments to run markets and economies and to micromanage things. It's going to, again, take away from the power of individuals, families, and local and state, and maybe even national interests in the favor of some kind of overarching world economic program to reset so that things are going to be managed better.
So I will read parts of this, and I'll try to find the person who submitted this texted a picture of it. So I will try to find where this originally was posted.
It was in the Vatican, the Osservatorio Romano, whatever. It was. It's the Vatican newspaper.
Well, then I will try to link that in the description. But basically, his point was, he was saying, our nation is going through. I'll read just a few excerpts from it. Our nation is going through a crisis which threatens its very future as free and democratic. The worldwide spread of Marxist materialism, which has already brought destruction and death to the lives of so many, and which has threatened the foundations of our nation for decades, now seems to seize the governing power over our nation. He talks about how we, in our attempt to, because we're so focused on materialism, we have made allies with the Chinese Communist government, which obviously the Chinese, if you don't know what the Chinese Communist government does to its people, you should definitely do some of your own research, especially about what they're doing to the Uyghurs right now. Do you know what they're doing to the Uyghurs right now? Basically keeping them in concentration camps. Okay. Do some research because it's really scary stuff. Anyway.
So if you're a Uyghur, be on guard.
Well, if you're Uyghur and you're watching this, I'm shocked, but please be safe.
And it's like they said about the Nazis back in the day. There was that one minister who said first they came for the prostitutes and the criminals, and they hauled them away, and we didn't say anything. And then they came for the Jews, and then they came for the Catholics. And now when they're coming for us, there's nobody to stand up.
Yep, no one else to say anything about it.
So that's pretty much the program. That's the socialist program as it has been acted out. I'm sure the socialist, like I said yesterday, it always starts with good intentions, but it ends up paving the road to hell.
So I guess Cardinal Burke's point is that he's saying, we're making a lot of allies with these people when we're just looking through a materialist worldview. And we're both free market capitalists. I think, if you want to spend your money on Chinese-made goods and that's the best value for your dollar, then you should do that. However,
Made in China.
We do. We're not just, as Catholic libertarians, we're not just out to save as much money as humanly possible and acquire as much wealth as we can. We also know that where we spend our money is voting with our wallet. We need to be conscious of where we're spending our money. Are we trying to support?
And are we supporting are we inadvertently, or just because we're not paying attention, supporting an unjust government and supporting a government that really probably has aspirations of destroying us,
or at
really,
least dominating us and making us controlled. But I let's try to focus back on COVID. I guess he's talking about how basically when we're all being afraid, it says it's been used by, like, what is clear, however, is that this virus has been used by certain forces inimical to families and to the freedom of nations to advance their evil agenda. These forces tell us that we are now the subjects of the so-called Great Reset, the new normal, which is dictated to us by their manipulation of citizens and nations through ignorance and fear. We are supposed to find in a disease and its prevention the way to understand and direct our lives rather than in God and in his plan for salvation. And he talks about the confusion regarding what the church truly teaches during this time. You know, if we're just letting the government dictate what the churches can do and dictate, there's so many things I want to say. It's so hard to put this all out there, and I'm trying not to talk too long, but the ultimate point is when we don't put God in his proper place in our lives, we look for other things to fill that place. And I think so many people have lost their sense of God in their life, and they looked to the government to fill that, or at least other human institutions to fill that role in their lives. And I think that only causes destruction and problems. Ultimately, God is the only person who can save us. I have a lot more to say about, the court cases of, there was a court case in Nevada called Calvary Chapel, Dayton Valley versus Steve Sisolak, who's the governor of Nevada, where, he was allowing casinos to operate at 50% capacity, but churches, no matter how large they were only allowed to have 25 people in at a time. Even in these churches that hold thousands of people, you were only allowed to have 25 people in at a time. Is the government doing things in a way that's fair? Is the government using this as an excuse to trample on our rights, especially religious liberty? Is it, if the government is treating everybody fair, I still don't want them telling us what to do, but we need to be vigilant as Catholics that we are not letting the government come in and take over our religious freedoms and take them away from us in a way that they are not going to give back. And we just need to be aware of the forces behind the things that the government is telling us to do or not to do. And we need to remember who's actually in charge, and that's God and Jesus. And we need to remember that ultimately, this is not, we have hope for heaven, which is a good thing, but we also have hope that this is not going to be the way it is forever. If we are diligent and we do not let the government have control of us forever, we are going to get back to a place where we can live relatively normal lives, working our jobs and being with the people that we love, and we will move past this pandemic. And I don't know.
And our money still says, "In God we trust," and hopefully that's who we trust, in God, not in Joe or Donald or the AOC or whoever,
Bernie Sanders,
or the World Economic Fund. whoever that hazy cabal might be composed of. But the Bible talks about, don't put your trust in princes. The princes of this world, they can't handle it. This world is not our home. This world is not what we're made for. Making too many accommodations to this world is a danger that leads us away from our true destiny and our true destination, which is supposed to be heaven. We're supposed to get to a point where we can be at home in heaven, and the only way to do that is to continue to let God be God. It's interesting that in the early parts of the Bible, the Israelites were trying to figure out what's the government that we should have. They were a tribe, and they were tribally organized, at least initially. But when they became more of a nation, then they started to talk about, we need to have a king. that was something that went against God to have a king.
And God allowed them to make that choice.
He allowed them, and he let them do it, and he gave it to them, and there was a great cost.
Mm-hmm.
There continues to be a great cost for the government that we have, and we never question that cost. We never question it too much, and the legitimate scope of the government. That's something that we're gonna, I assume, be talking about ad nauseum in the future. But the scope of the government is almost always one that gets expanded in these moments of crisis. And how much of a crisis this has been depends on who you talk to and what you ask about. Initially they were talking about this COVID being like a new, plague. Yeah, 1 in 1,000 people has died from this.
Yeah.
Is that a reason to shut down the world? Is that a reason to allow the government to become the big daddy of everything and to take away people, people who want to be working, people who want to be supporting their family, people who want to be taking responsibility for themselves have been disallowed from that. They've been pushed out of that, and instead the government is sending out checks to people.
Yeah.
So the government has become the provider.
Stealing our own money and sending it back to us.
And again, undermining the value of the family, the value of the church, the value of the neighborhood, the value of all these different things has been. I don't know if that's the intention.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think it is. Sometimes, if you read the socialist playbook, the first thing you need to do is try to undermine the family connections that people have.
The point I wanted to end on is we need to be careful that we are not, even though we might have to be physically separated from some of our relatives right now, we need to be careful that we're not spiritually isolating ourselves and mentally isolating ourselves from the people that we love, because that is when fear creeps in, and that's when the government can come in and say, it's okay, I'm here to help you. And that's when we will give into that. And we need to be careful that we don't isolate ourselves, and we stay strong, and we remember who's in charge, that we have each other. The sun will rise tomorrow. It's going to be okay. And that's ultimately what I want to leave this on.
Okay, we'll leave it at that. We've become a sepia toned.
I know, it's completely
almost a sepia toned black and white, like Intolerance. Good movie.
We'll try to film earlier in the day next time so that we don't end up like this. Because I don't know, I'm not sure if I'm going to leave it in, but we did turn the light on for a minute and it was so bright you couldn't see anything. It was like, oh either. Boy. So anyway, we're going to end this and we will talk to you soon, I'm sure.
God bless you all.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Over and out.